Well, I'm going to keep pounding that drum because I find it every single day to be outrageous that just how many actual elected African-American leaders are falling in line behind Michael Bloomberg like the Pied Piper because he's throwing money up in the air. And no one's calling him out and asking him for his actual views, not what he spewed for 20 years and switched last year. And to help me break that down and more, Jadan Horyn joins us. He's a Republican strategist, and he's also one heck of a writer, might I say, because he recently wrote an article about us here at Liquid Lunch on Metropolitan Magazine. We'll get to that later.
We'll get to that later.
But I want to go over the whole thing with all the whole Democratic stuff, but how are these African-American leaders getting behind Bloomberg with not a question asked when you've seen what he's been saying for the last 20 years?
Well, it's the Bloomberg billions buy-off. Come on. He's a billionaire. It's how he became the mayor of New York City. It's how he was able to get elected to an unprecedented third term. Who cares what he said? His money speaks. And it speaks loudly. And frankly, a lot of these Democratic lawmakers are they're concerned about Sanders, and they want someone viable. And yeah, so if he said something they didn't like in the past, oh well, he has good money. He can fund an apparatus for the Democratic Party that has fallen apart. And
he said that he decreased stop and frisk by 95% by the time he left office, which they cited the last 2 years, and after the city had been sued and they had to end it. But at its peak, when he was mayor for 12 years, as you mentioned, he bought his third term. And for those of you around the country who are assessing Mike Bloomberg, you know what he said about redlining, you know what he said about stop and frisk. But keep this in mind. In New York City, there was a referendum one time where they asked the people to vote on a single issue. Would you like the mayor to be term limited at 2 terms, right? You know this. We're New Yorkers, right? So this isn't a New York issue. This is a character issue. And when you talk about, somebody with maybe a Napoleon complex, look no further than a man who looks at the vote of the people, voted overwhelmingly to cap the mayor at 2 years, right?
2 terms.
2 terms.
Yep.
And then using his philanthropic arms, went out and teamed up with all of his favorite council people's favorite charities, and suddenly everyone fell into line. So every day when you see, another 2 or 3, minority leaders or elected folks who are coming out behind Bloomberg, I say just follow the money on that stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if we're going to talk about a presidential candidate who is a threat to, our republic and someone who isn't going to honor the term limits at the federal level, rather than look to Trump, maybe we should look to someone who's already destroyed the idea of term limits when they were an elected official.
Yeah, I mean that, all the hullabaloo on the left is, Trump's never going to leave office. He's going to try to get a third term.
President for life.
The new Democratic savior, the new shiny object, oversaw one of the biggest stop and frisk programs ever, escalated 6 times from what he inherited as, okay? Said that the cause of the whole bank crisis and the mortgage crisis because they eliminated the rules on redlining and they gave out mortgages in minority neighborhoods. Oh, and by the way, when it comes to listening to the people, his constituents, we voted 2 terms. He bought a third term. So that's a threat.
Yeah,
somebody we know did it.
Yeah, someone we know who has a record doing it, and now because he is worth $60 billion, that money is very attractive to a Democratic Party that cannot compete because they have a message that no one wants to support, and donors, big and small, are not giving to them in order to support their agenda.
And for those of you keeping score at home, Mike Bloomberg is worth $60 billion with a B. Okay, he's spent $350 million with an M. So 60 billion, 10%, 600 million. He spent like 3/4% of his whole net worth in the last month, and he didn't even blink.
He didn't even blink.
So
he wants to spend $2 billion to defeat the president.
That's what I'm saying.
And the thing is that he says even if he's not the nominee, he's willing to pour that money into the Democratic Party and the Democratic nominee.
Well, let's see if
that's why these guys
really,
are falling in line.
Let's see if
because they see that $2 billion
really
and
happens.
they want it.
I don't think that's going to happen. But also, let us not forget, for all the talk about Trump, Hillary outraised him by like 4 times for what she spent and what Trump spent. But he found something. He got people to believe in his message. He tapped into something with the middle class that I hear you, I see you, I care about our borders, I care about jobs. I don't see, we showed a clip yesterday. Did you see Bloomberg's response when they questioned him on the stop and frisk video and his policy?
What did he say?
He sat there and he stared in the camera and he paused, like really pregnant pause for like 10 seconds. And I was like, didn't anybody prepare him that? No, it wasn't dramatic. It was like stunted. Like, wait a minute, I thought I paid everyone here to not ask me that question. Why did someone ask me it? And then he stumbled through an explanation of why that was what he thought 5 years ago, but that's not what he thinks now. And someone yelled out, "Well, will you apologize for it?" And then he just brushed it off, and he went on and went that away. So it doesn't look like the early rounds for him. He hasn't been seen in the primary. He hasn't been seen in the debate. He hasn't been seen in the caucus. He seems to be getting banged around a little bit here, but I don't think he's very charismatic to begin.
Launch a broadside attack on someone they think is an oligarch, which is what they're running against, right? Big money in politics.
This is an actual oligarch.
Yes, it's an actual.
Controls a news media organization, and one of the wealthiest men in the country. Basically, an oligarch. I want to shift it up a little bit. Talk about a topic that I know you and I both care about very much. Our friend Roger Stone, and. To me, it seems like the cavalry is coming. It seems like, somebody down there is realizing, hey, wait a minute, we didn't do anything wrong. Why are our people getting thrown in jail and theirs aren't? What do you make of what's happening now?
I mean, there are so many components to this. First we have whether or not the crime that he committed deserves the sentencing that was recommended. So that's one issue. Another is the Justice Department saying that they're going to evaluate the sentencing guidelines, and then these, prosecutors essentially resigning or saying that they're not going to be involved in the case. Then you have the president getting involved, but then we have evidence coming out that the jurors demonstrated substantial bias towards both the president and Roger Stone, and somehow neither the prosecutors nor the defense attorneys discovered this. And that really opens the question to, was justice served if the jurors were inherently biased going into the deliberations?
Not only that, the jury forewoman, like the head of the jury, apparently. But, Jadan, I got to say, you know what I mean?
Where were the prosecutors? Where were the defense attorneys to do this research?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm great friends with Roger. I try to highlight the, free Roger Stone all the time. Frankie and I had a fundraiser for him for his efforts. You know all this stuff.
Yeah.
I know he paid good money for his lawyers, right? If someone is coming before me on voir dire, if I'm an attorney, and I'm not, I would think someone on my staff would have at least Googled the person, went through all their social media, all their photos, try to find some derogatory, some disqualifying things on them. How can we possibly find out? What kind of representation did he have if we're finding out now that the forewoman was a Trump hater and ran for Congress?
Exactly. Look, I'm not an attorney, but this is my concern too. He was clearly not represented well. I definitely think there is a case that could be made to the bar and therefore judges that oversee this, that the case, both the prosecutors and the defense attorneys didn't do their due diligence to find out this information. Because then the other argument is, how did the U.S. Attorney's Office not know not bring this to the attention of the defense?
I'm with you.
Did they seriously know about this? And what if it had come out in the middle of the trial? How would no one know?
You would think the basic. All right.
You realize that. Had it come out in the middle of the trial, the U.S. Attorney's case would have been entirely blown up because the judge would have said, this juror demonstrates substantial bias. They need to be dismissed. This is a mistrial.
It's a mistrial.
So why would they take that risk? They shouldn't take that risk. But yet they didn't do their due diligence. It's just unbelievable.
Why,
so this entire case has become kind of a massive disaster of our justice system.
Yeah. All for me, for, you know, an unjust prosecution. You know what I mean? He probably, a process crime, he should have got, you know, some censure, you know, some maybe probation, house arrest for 6 months, and, you know, if he even wanted to settle. I don't think he's guilty of anything, so I'm proud of him the way he's fighting, but he is facing jail at almost 70 years old. So, you know, it looks like, you know, the Attorney General is getting a little aggravated with the president. He came out last night and said, you know, it doesn't make my job any easier when he's tweeting and making it look like, although I didn't take any guidance, he's never called me on anything, but it does make my job almost impossible. So maybe the wheels of justice are turning in the right direction, and this is one area where the prez could lay off his AG on the tweeting. I don't know.
I mean, I think, you know, if President Trump wants to pardon Roger Stone or commute a sentence, either or, he should just do it. Rather than tweet about it and give the appearance that pressure is made on the Justice Department that is some kind of undue interference with a prosecution. Since the AG said that didn't happen, then why give the appearance of it? Trump should just say, look, when this is all said and done, I'm going to pardon Roger Stone. I think this is, you know, an abuse of the justice system, and we need to, you know, let him go.
I think you should just come out and do it. We're in the lead. We got, you know, we're in the front. I think his base would be like, finally, one for the good guys, but who knows? Last thing, I know you want to talk about this, but on the Democrat side, you know, Bernie Sanders is up there like, you know, like he's at a carnival. You know, you're getting free health care. Oh, and free college for everybody. And then the student loan debts, we're going to get rid of it all. So you would understand why millennials would be like, yeah, well, for Bernie, you're getting everything free. You know, how bad is this crisis with the student loan debt and young kid debt and all this other stuff? So,
debt for my generation, you know, people that are 18 to 35, of just student loans has exceeded $1.2 trillion, or more than consumer credit card debt, which is around $960 billion, which is a new record, and the largest, fastest growing part of that is debt for young people, people age 18 to 35. And that's because their incomes aren't keeping up. Most of my generation reached, you know, peak level of mature earnings during the beginning of the recession. So their first jobs, instead of making $45,000, they made $28,000.
Yep.
So they are, you know, orders of degree behind.
Barely paying.
Exactly.
They're paying the penalty.
They're behind in their debt, they're paying the penalties, and then their promotions don't catch them up to what someone whose first job was in, you know, the summer of 2008 would have gotten.
On the macro scale, you said 1.2 trillion.
Trillion.
So if you're for Bernie, when he says we're going to get rid of all student loan debt, that's $1.2 trillion. That's on top of the $10 trillion for the healthcare. So if you're not figuring it out yet, the math, those trillions are coming out of your pocket and your paycheck. So keep those trillions in mind. We're going to take a quick break. I just want to point out that Jadan did write a fantastic article about Liquid Lunch on Metropolitan Magazine. I want to thank you very much for that. It was very objective. I thought you were going to be a little harder on me, but it was straight, and you did a lot of work. I thought it really encompassed what we are and what we're trying to do here at Liquid Lunch. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you for watching, but do not go anywhere. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back right after this and give you more of what you're looking for, a Freaky Friday Liquid Lunch, right after this.